We are live.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to the special committee of the whole. Now calling the meeting to order. Roll call has been taken. Does anybody have a declaration of pecuniary interest they need to make regarding any item on this afternoon's agenda? Seeing no raised hands. So we have one presentation on today's agenda. And I've spoken to Mr. Pecula, who'll be providing us the presentation. He believes he'll take slightly longer than 10 minutes. So I'm looking for a motion to extend the time period of 10 minutes, moved by Councillor McCurry, second by Councillor Scully. What is your motion?
Let's start with 60, Mayor, 6-0.
A total of 60.
60 minutes.
All right. So that's the resolution on the floor. Any discussion about that? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Motion to extend the presentation time to 60 minutes carries on a recorded vote of 9-1 with the required 2/3 votes. Councillors voting in favor as follows: Councillor Sless, McCurry, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. Members opposed, Councillor Carpenter.
All right. So as I said previously, we have one item on the agenda this afternoon, and it's the new sports and entertainment facility for the city of Brantford. And we have one presentation. And so I'm inviting, he's already up here, Ronald Paduka, who is managing partner of KKR Advisors, to commence his presentation. And I'm very happy to say I don't have to limit you to 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Your worship, members of council, pleasure to be here again this evening. Purpose of tonight is, or this afternoon, is to go through the proposed Sports Entertainment Center, the phase 1 report that we issued last week on the feasibility and business case assessment for that facility. And let me just go through. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So just as a bit of background, we were retained back in May to prepare a plan for a new SEC, looking at its location, its capital and operating costs, a financing plan and delivery plan. And what we've presented so far is the phase 1 business case assessment, which looks at the Brantford market and its ability to support an Ontario Hockey League franchise and therefore a sports entertainment center. We look at the size of that building, how big it should be in terms of number of fixed seats. We then looked at a potential cost of that building and how big of a site that building needs to sit on. We look at a programming schedule. So how many events and how many people would this type of a facility attract in Brantford? We provide you a 10-year operating pro forma and finally give you an assessment of the economic impact of this building. So moving on to the market summary. What I'm going to tell you, I don't think is a mystery to anyone in the city and certainly any member of council. If I was the OHL, I would say this is a very, very viable market for an OHL team. It needs a new building, but certainly, particularly in comparison to 17 other Ontario-based OHL teams, it performs and ranks at least in the top half of those centers. It's got strong population growth. It's the 13th largest. It will grow to become the 11th largest by 2046. Its median household income has grown faster and by a higher total amount than any other city in Ontario. If you look at it from an economic and a business perspective, the number of businesses and the economy that's present is growing faster and is projected to grow faster than all but a number of municipalities across the province. And from a development perspective, when you look and see what's happening, so people are moving here, businesses are moving here, they're investing into this community. We're seeing the total number of value of building permits issued higher than anywhere else. All very positive factors, and all very positive to a prospective franchise owner who's looking at this market and saying, this is where I would like to be, or the Ontario Hockey League itself looking at this market and saying, like, this is where I want to be. And I think if you circle back to December of last year, I think it was a very wise decision by Mr. Andlauer to want to temporarily relocate the team here. We then looked at Brantford across each of the 60 Canadian Hockey League franchise cities, including the US ones. We focused on a handful from a local perspective and a regional perspective and looked at how those teams from 2010 have averaged in terms of attendance. We did an analysis of the Brantford market against each of those centers. And our conclusion is that an OHL team playing in Brantford in a sufficiently sized building should attract somewhere in the range of 3,800 to 4,200 fans per game. And that's an average of about 4,000. If I look at how then buildings perform and understand that the OHL team and OHL teams or CHL teams in their buildings generally are going to comprise 40 to 60% of the total events that happen in that facility, you want to make sure that the building is sized appropriately for the team, because the team is going to generate sponsorship sales, it's going to generate advertising sales, it's going to support the naming rights of the venue, it's going to support food and beverage sales, it's going to then be able to support suite sales and club lease sales, seat sales, and loge box sales, all of which are important. So as we look at the buildings and how they operate, our opinion is that of a venue that's going to attract or have a capacity total of about 75 to 80% is the right number. That then yields a building in the size of 5,000 to 5,300 fixed seats. So including the floor and standing room, that would be about 5,500 to 6,000 seats. We then looked at the cost to build that building. So what's it going to cost? I looked at every building that's been built in this country since 1998, projected that cost forward, looked at it and said, if it was built today, $17,500 a seat, let's project that out to about 2025 or 2026. That number increases to 22.5 to 27.5, or about 115 to 140 million dollars, excluding site costs of site acquisition costs and infrastructure upgrades that are needed for it, parking, etc. In order to site this building properly, you need about 4 acres. And it's not just 4 acres, it's a site that's about 350 feet by 500 feet. That is a very generous site. You can put it in a building, you can put that building in a site that's slightly smaller, but from a functionality perspective and an ease of developability perspective, that to me would be a supportive side and appropriate size of site for the building. So just to give an idea of the types of buildings that are of that 5,000 to 5,300 seats, here's 6 examples. Brampton, 5,000 seats, 1998. Chilliwack Coliseum, 5,000 seats, 2000. Langley Event Center, 5,000 seats, 2004. Oshawa Tribute Community Center, 2006. St. Catharines Meridian Center, 2014. Kingston Leon Center, 2006 to 2008, 5,400 seats. Those bottom 3 buildings, Oshawa, St. Catharines, Kingston, those are the ones that I comp you against. So I'm giving you what they have done since 2010, or in the case of St. Catharines, 2014, in terms of events, in terms of revenues and operating expenses. So now I looked at, okay, so now I know how big this building's going to be. What happens in it? We know there's going to be 36 home games. There's going to be 2 exhibitions. There's going to be 34 regular season. I never project playoffs. I want there to be lots of playoff games, but you can't count on playoff games. But what else can you do? Well, we can do concerts, we can do family shows, we can do figure skating shows, we can do Stars on Ice, Disney on Ice, Peppa Pig Live. We can do all of those types of events in here. We can bring in other sporting events. We can bring in the national women's team and men's team and basketball and boxing and MMA, and we can do that 12 months of the year. How many of those can we get? Well, understanding that Brantford is in the shadow of Toronto and Scotiabank Arena, Budweiser Stage, Rogers Centre. You're in the shadow of Hamilton, and Hamilton, don't forget, is doing a $100 million renovation on the First Ontario Centre. You're also in the shadow of the Budweiser Gardens in London. Equally important, you got a promoter, Live Nation, that's financially invested in some of those buildings. So if I'm going to bring a concert in, I'm going to put it to where I'm going to make my most money. So I need to be careful that I don't project a great number of concerts into this facility. And that's why I'm saying there's only going to be 2. If you look at some of these other buildings across the province, 6, 8, 10, London gets like 30. I think you can get 2. In some cases, it's going to be 0. In some years, you will not get a concert. In other years, you might get 3 or 4. But I think 2 is a good number to project going forward on a conservative basis. So anyways, based on that analysis, I think you get 75 events per year. That attracts 195,000 people through those doors. Those 195,000 people, they buy concessions, some of them buy suites, some of them buy club seats, some of them buy loge boxes. You get corporations coming in and saying, I want to sponsor the building. I want it to be called the KKR Center. I get someone coming in and saying, I want you to exclusively sell KKR beer. I want you to exclusively sell KKR hot dogs and potato chips. So I get the building makes those sponsorship arrangements for them and gets money for that. We've assessed all of those numbers, and I think you'd be able to make about $3.5 million a year of gross revenue. Operating that building, you got to pay people to run it. You got to pay hydro. You've got to do lots of maintenance repairs. You have events set up and take down costs. That's going to be about $4.2 million a year. And salaries are going to be about half of that number. That's going to have a net operating deficit of about $670,000, which is kind of what Oshawa has done recently. But Oshawa, don't forget, has got a second ice pad associated with it. It's similar to what Meridian Center has been doing in St. Catharines, but it's less. And apart from Kingston, which actually makes an operating surplus, revenue less expenses are positive. It wasn't in 2020 or 2021 and even 2022. So I had to look at what was happening in the 2010s because there were still restrictions of use and occupancy into early 2022, which skews numbers. But I think those numbers, quite frankly, are realistic for what a venue, a 5,300 seat venue in Brantford could operate. Finally, I look at the economic impact. So what does this mean? Well, certainly when it's built, and again, I'm looking at this as floating around the confines of 200 feet above Brantford. I haven't placed it anywhere yet. So when you build a building, big economic impact is going to be lots of spending, over $250 million of total spending, resulting in 150 million of GDP impact. That's a big number. A lot of that will happen in Brantford. There's going to be 1,300 jobs that are created. Again, a lot is going to be in Brantford. Those people will be paid $90 million, and the provincial and the federal government will get money from sales taxes and from income taxes, and that's another 25 million. When it's up and running, it's a $13 million a year business impact throughout the economy. Again, lots of impact to Brantford-based businesses. It's got 95 people working in the economy because of it, generating $6 million of income and $2.5 million of taxes to the feds in the province. What else do you get though? Well, you've got this OHL team that's going to play in it, and they're going to generate an additional $4.5 to $5 million a year. And then you get your enhanced sports and event hosting capability. As I said before, Peppa Pig's coming in here, and the promoters of that and the act itself is going to hire people to put that thing on, and people from away are going to come into Brantford and spend green dollars and spend money in hotels and book nights and money in restaurants and retail and taxis and everything, and that will spin out. The final thing that's going to happen is you'll likely see incremental development. And I gave you examples of what happened in London, in Guelph, in Oshawa, in Kingston, and Moncton. And again, just to highlight Moncton, when they built their building and they were getting about $8 to $20 million a year, they said in 5 years, we want to do $110 million of new development in our downtown. In 5 years when it's opened, they surpassed it in 3. That's the type of impact that can happen from these buildings. You look at what happened in London, vacancy rates declined considerably, rents went up, and there's a $250 million increase in assessed value in the downtown. So these can have very positive impacts in the community. So so in terms of next steps, so now I've figured out, or I've helped you guys figure out how big of a building is and how it's going to operate and how much it's going to cost. Now, what we're going to do now is actually identify and recommend a site for you. I've got an architect that's then going to put a site plan together of what it's going to look like on the site. They're going to get floor plans, and equally importantly, they're going to do some renditions, street views, looking into the building with Brantford in the background to show you what this potentially could look like. We'll be done that in the middle of October. In the middle of November, I'm then going to tell you how you can pay for it. I'm going to give you examples of what other cities have done and how they've structured their deals. We're going to talk and have negotiations with certain landowners that talked about what they could potentially do and what dollars they could bring to the table. And I'll do that by the end of November, and we'll finalize a consolidated report of all of those documents. And then we'll be back in December, by the end of December, and give you the full Monty report. So, questions from council?
Floor is open for questions. Who's going to start? Councilor McCurry.
Welcome back, sir. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Did I hear you say that co-locating the new arena, in an example you gave, co-locating a new arena next to an existing arena reduced the per rink operating costs?
In Oshawa, it absolutely did.
Okay. Oshawa, am I thinking of the 5 rink?
No.
No, that's what.
Tribute Community Center, originally called General Motors Center, is located just beside downtown Oshawa. To the east of it, and it's a main rink with the center courtyard, and then there's the auxiliary community pad beside it. Both were brand new construction.
Okay. And incorporation of other complementary facilities operated by the same body might further reduce operating costs?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for being here again tonight. It's ironic that the majority of every one of those arenas you talked about, I've lived in every one of those cities, and I saw exactly what it would do to a downtown core and how it impacted. So just leading up to what Councilor McCurry said, I know Sault Ste. Marie did the exact same thing. They built in the parking lot of their building, basically right on the street.
Mhm.
Do we have enough space in between the current Civic Center to do that very same project?
Short answer is absolutely you do. To the south end, you absolutely do. It could go on to the pathway to the south, but not much more than that. You can almost put it on the exact footprint of the space immediately to the south of the auditorium.
How much does parking really play into having a new arena now? Because again, living in London, I watched them take it from the Ice House on the south side of 401 to downtown, which probably has about 45 parking spots for 9,200 seats. But people seem to find that. Was that brought into this equation as well to see whether or not parking really does need to be needed for that event, or will people look at it? And again, do we have the suffice amount of space for that too?
So parking will be the most important issue that the public will bring up. Where if I go to a game, where do I park? And as I've always said, in each city that I've been involved in, councilors have always told me parking's an issue in our city. You've never seen parking like there is an issue in our city. And I always say that the parking is an issue because Joe or Jane Q Public can't leave and arrive at the rink 5 minutes before the puck drop and get that spot right out front. So parking is important. A building like this is going to need 2,000 parking spaces. Those 2,000 parking spaces do not need to be located beside it. They need to be located within a 10 to 15 minute walk. And in fact, if you built a building with a sea of parking in and around it, that last corner spot is still going to be about an 8 to 10 minute walk away from the building. But as of right now, all we've done is we've got this building floating around Brantford. We have not yet looked at location, and parking will be a factor that factors into a recommended location.
Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. You talked about several arenas and they're all running deficits except for one.
Correct.
So I'm assuming we can fully expect to run a deficit. But you also talked about spin-off growth around the arena. Do the taxes from the spin-off growth cover off the deficit for the actual arena?
So I guess in theory, yes.
Okay,
And again, it's a very complicated thing because sometimes that incremental tax that is generated because of either assessed value increase or a new development happening, sometimes that value is that land value, that assessed value is captured and is used by the city as an income stream to support the debt payment that for what they need to raise in order to pay for the building. You can look at it that way. You can also say, oh, well, what I'm also going to do is potentially use that and bring it into operating revenue for the facility to drive that number lower.
and have cities tracked that incremental increase around the arenas?
Certainly London has, certainly Oshawa has, I believe Kingston has. It's not something that many do. Moncton, I know for sure has.
Okay.
But are they saying that's an income stream that's reducing that operating deficit? I can't tell you the answer to that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Hunt.
Through the chair to you. I guess my question is around the impact of out-of-town visitors, and so this facility is going to attract visitors from out of town that are going to stay in hotels, that are going to dine out in restaurants. So how important is access to the facility from something in our case as the 403?
Well, it's critical. I think the good news is it is not so again, we haven't looked at location yet, but say it's downtown. It's not a difficult drive to get from 403 to downtown. Particularly if you're from away like me. Like it took me 8 minutes. Like it's not a big deal. It's different from, if it was at 401 in Garden, or if it was at 403 in Garden, or 403 in Gretzky, right? That it's immediately off the highway. The issue that you have there is that kind of results in a drive-in, drive-out. Like to get maximum benefit from these sites, you really need people to come early and stay late. Because that then drives me to then go to a restaurant and then go to the game and saying, well, you know what, I'm not going to leave straight away because of traffic. What I'm going to do is then go to a pub, or maybe I'm just going to stay overnight. But if I can get in and out quickly, I'm gone. There's no impact for me.
Yeah, I guess for me, London, I do the one in London quite often.
Yeah.
And call it that milk run, when you get off the 401, you got to go all the way
Yeah.
in.
So I would agree with you that London's a bit of a drive from 401.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I would say it's not particularly from someone who's from away. It's not that big a deal to get from 403 down.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other first-time questions? Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. When you talked about other uses for the facility, this facilities look basically for ice. And is there opportunity to look at twinning the facility and maybe picking up a basketball team?
Absolutely. These venues, like the venue in Moncton has two tenants. It's got a basketball team and a hockey team.
Because London has a
Exactly.
triple C, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Hamilton seems to have no interest in a triple Cs. And there's a
And-
market available for a triple C for us, isn't there not?
Absolutely. It all relates to available dates. And if you can make them work. The thing about basketball though is it's expensive because you have to put the floor, you got to put the floor down, then they play the game. And depending upon when their next game is or when the next hockey game is, then you got to take it up again and put it back down. That's manpower, that's time. Somebody has to pay for that. The numbers that you see and that I presented don't necessarily have that in. So that would be an added cost, but certainly having a second team tenant in there, 100% you can do that.
Okay. I was thinking if you would twin a facility as well, an
Correct.
opportunity to add another facility on the same location. Okay, now, do you look at the city's parking garage? How close it is to downtown? To our current civic center?
Yeah, it's like 1,900 spaces. 951.
Yeah,
Right
so
now.
we need 2,000 spaces. There's 950 right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Of course, we can't add on to that one. It was designed to add on, but wasn't, the quality is not there, I don't think, for adding on to it. So you're talking about, you looked at 3 locations. So
We have not started the location search yet. That's kind of later on. That's the next step that we do now until October the 15th or 16th.
So if we went and looked at 3 locations, for example, and then what's the process look like? Then we select 3 locations, or we select locations for you to look at?
So my next step is, and maybe I can't do that. So I will hold an information gathering session with council where I need to get your input in terms of what sort of a lens am I going to look at this from? Right, all of you are here. I get to leave, you don't. You have to live with the decision, particularly, as I said, location, which is kind of the number one most discussed topic. I need your input to say, how do I evaluate, and is cost more important than parking, is more important than ease of development, is more important than something else? And
So
I need that input from you.
So we wouldn't be making a final decision.
No. I will then look at a bunch of sites and 3 sites, and we'll do a detailed review based on that criteria that you guys help me with. And then I will come back to you at the end of October with a recommended site.
But then we select the site, but then that involves negotiation for that particular site. But then we don't find out how to pay for it till later. So
Yeah.
we get to find out how to pay for it before we decide to select the site, how it's going to be funded.
Both of those phases are kind of running in parallel. I need a site first in order to figure out how to pay for it, because each of those are going to be different. And it's the analysis of how does the land value or the assessed tax value capture work? How does the joint development proposal part work? Some are going to be simple, some are going to be much more complex. But if you think that business deal is the fundamental driver of location, then it's the cost of the city is going to be the number one factor that you think I need to consider as I do this. And therefore I need to get business deal done first.
And in the other communities, when did those communities involve the public in what the public would like to see?
So that will be, so I would imagine that's going to be in the early part of 2024. So all of the background research and analysis is done, presented to council. Council then says, yeah, we're in on this. Now let's go to, and again, that's why I'm here tonight, because this is up at a public session. So people can understand what we're talking about from this building, what it is, and then to start to think about, location and cost and how it gets paid for, and then come back to you with comments.
So we have an opportunity to ask the public what they think before we make a final decision, is what you're saying?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. You mentioned that we have had the fastest income growth in Ontario.
Correct.
Over what period of time?
Since 2000. So if I look at the 2020 census, the 2021 census,
Right.
average median household income was $40,000, and now it's $89,000. That 90 some odd % increase and $40,000 increase was higher than any other OHL city in Ontario.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that our community is growing, how important is that in making our city, as you say, an attractive location for an OHL franchise and to be considered by the OHL community as a good place to be?
It's a number of factors. A growing city means that in theory, younger families are going to come in. And the Ontario Hockey League, quite frankly, is a family-oriented entertainment. They want to have their tickets priced appropriately to draw that type of family. If more and more are coming in, it makes it easier and easier to fill up your building because you don't have to sell to a higher percentage of them. If your population was declining and you wanted to average 4,000, you've got to sell those 4,000 tickets to a higher percentage of the population each and every year. By doing, if with a growing, it's different. It's the other way around. It's a lower percentage. That was that local market penetration rate, regional market penetration rate that we included in the analysis. You know, older, mature cities who are having declining, like that's an issue. You, on the other hand, I think that's a huge benefit and a huge quiver, you know, a huge positive for Brantford.
Right. So if we weren't growing and if we didn't have growth in income, it'd be hard to bring an OHL team here.
It would be harder.
Yeah.
Because don't forget, it's not just people. You've got corporations that are coming in here. Again, like we looked at the number of businesses that have opened up in the city since 2020. And you're one of the higher ones of all of the OHL teams, so OHL cities in the province. Like again, like really strong economic fundamentals that if I'm the OHL, I'm scratching my head and say, we need to get a team here.
Right. Now, some have said to be considered as a venue for the Memorial Cup, you have to have an arena at least 7,500 seats. Is that true?
No,
If you only have 5,000 seats, are you still considered to be a possible venue for the Memorial Cup?
correct. There have been since 2010, a number of venues, a number of cities with venues under 5,500 or 5,000 seats that have hosted Memorial Cup.
And what do the hockey leaders consider when determining where Memorial Cup goes?
So being the host city, so winning the Ontario Hockey
Yeah.
League championship is the easy way to get in.
Right.
Because you're guaranteed. But if you are selected as the host city, which happens once every 3 years, you are in a competition. Now, the OHL is going to look at it, and the Canadian Hockey League is going to look at it and look at the level of team that you have to make sure that you are at least going to be competitive. So you're not, you know, you're not going to lose every single game. But it also comes down to availability of hotels, availability of you know, financial guarantees that are going to come in, which was a big issue. And you know, one of my clients in Western Canada had an issue with that in terms of what they couldn't or unwilling to do to their building in order to get the Memorial Cup. But it's a lot of factors into it. But the size of the building isn't necessarily a differentiating factor, nor is the size of the market, because there's centers smaller than Brantford that have hosted Memorial Cup.
My question, I think, goes to our CAO. And what currently is the operating deficit of the Civic Center
$515,000,
and the Wayne Gretzky Center?
about 2.1 million for all four rinks, about 500, but roughly the same, about 525,000. And then Lions Park is about 225,000.
And the Sanderson Center?
Oh, got me. I don't know that one. So sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I can find that out though.
Okay, all right. Anyone else have first round questions before I go to Councillor McCreary? Councillor McCreary, I think you raised your hand for a second time.
Mr. Mayor, if I can, I have, I forgot Sarah Monroe is here and she can answer that last question about Sanderson Center.
Sarah Monroe, Director of Economic Development, Tourism and Cultural Initiatives. The Sanderson Center's operating deficit is around $550,000 annually.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor McCreary, over to you.
Mayor, thank you. And through you, the sourcing of patrons for the new building I suppose it depends on location with respect to what percentage would come from away and what percentage would come from locals. If it's on the highway, perhaps we get more from away, quick in, quick out. But if it's a city center, say next to Civic Center, I would have to think that you'd be more attractive to locals who would have a more difficult time necessarily finding their way up at 403 in some cases.
I don't think that is necessarily the case. I would think that from the OHL team's perspective, its following is going to be based as much on the on-ice success of the team versus, whether it's located right off the 403 or downtown. In terms of other events that come in, I think those other events are going to attract anyways. And again, you've got, call it 100,000 people now going to 150 odd thousand people in the next 30, 40 years. At 5,000 seats or 5,500 seats, there's a good probability that a lot of locals are going to buy those up anyways. So irrespective of whether it's, we're at center ice right now, or it's somewhere out on the highway, it's going to be the same general profile that's going to be very similar who buys those tickets.
If we were to be trading seats, that you were sitting here and we were sitting there, would you think it might be beneficial to look at an intercity location and a suburban location as two options?
I think for sure it would.
Okay. Thank you.
That's Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's rather quick. Just a point I raise this all the time. The county of Brant is a city, just like we are, full city services. And they're going to grow dramatically. And they're the second largest city in all of Ontario geographically. So the recognition that that city and this city are both going to grow. Did that enter any considerations about the economic benefits for both the city and the county?
Absolutely. So in looking at this building in this city, we looked at not only the city, but also the CMA, which includes Brant County, which includes Six Nations, the Grand River, which includes others. Where that information wasn't existing, so for example, on the population projections, we added the Brant County numbers to the city of Brantford numbers, to the Six Nation numbers to get that number.
Okay.
Right. So again, I'm not looking at this small geography. I'm looking, that's why I looked at regional and local and regional in terms of how this building could perform.
Okay. And when you talked about their downtown versus highway access, we also have a highway that's very near the main train line. So if in future access to GO service, would that also have an impact on site selection?
Yeah.
It would. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
I find the income growth in Brantford probably the most significant change that I've become aware of. I don't know how it happened so fast, but it has. Did you do a similar study on the county income and how quickly it's grown? Because it's still significantly above Brantford's. Was that taken in, and how?
Yeah, no. So again, whenever I look at anything, I did city and I did CMA, which includes the county. And again, and then I also looked at the county separately. If you look at my spreadsheet, here's city, here's county, and here's CMA. And then I look at all of them together. That always factors in because it's not, there's not this, wall around the city that you can't cross to get in. Like, we're not Trump. We're not keeping people out, right? We want people to come in.
Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so I'm going to kind of stick handle and go in all different types of directions. So I saw the impact of the Budweiser Gardens had in London, moving it to downtown and the impact it had. If downtown is the logical area, I do know Budweiser Gardens has a restaurant within there or a seating area for dining. Is it feasibly possible to have a restaurant built within this facility that would have outside access 7 days a week into the building, where we would be able to then try to generate revenue with having market rates going into whoever wants to do it? And I'm thinking of Bridgestone Arena for that, because they got that wonderful, almost, double decked type environment. Is that an opportunity for us? Do you think that would work? Do you think that could be something that could be looked at to generate revenue, to kind of cut into some of the expenses that it's going to cost to run the city, to run the arena?
Absolutely. That could be franchised out to someone. I won't name names, but that could be franchised out. They could become the hot, they could be the caterer into the suites and the club seats and the loge boxes. Right?
In your past experiences, have they been able to be a part of picking up the cost to have that built?
To be honest, I think the added revenue that they generate is positive. The cost benefit of what's the cost of adding that in, I'd say it might be a push, but it certainly adds to the vitality of what is in the area. It gives another destination for people to go. And again, it also, I think, helps spawn, down the road, another new restaurant from opening up or expanding or improving and doing something else. So I think it's a positive aspect.
Okay, thank you.
I know we're not getting into location specifics, but I know when I go to the Budweiser Gardens in London, the fact that there are restaurants in and around Budweiser Gardens makes it it's one of the factors I consider if I decide I want to go there. How much of a factor is that in out of town people coming into our arena? Like if it's on the 403 and there's not much around it, or if it's somewhere else in the city that does have, other entertainment facilities, a casino, restaurants, what is that a factor in making a location attractive and or not attractive?
So I think those decisions are second.
Yeah. Okay.
Decision one is, do I want to get a ticket? Yes or no? And then I plan my event. So my Ron Badalka's personal event of coming to Brantford is show starts at 8. We're going to go to dinner first. So where are we going to go? And I got to make sure that I'm going to book well enough in advance so I get a reservation, because if I book to this in the morning, I'm probably full up. So that's the point. So whether it's, I'm not doing that at the same time. And in theory, you have a more abundancy of choices for restaurants, I think, if it's a downtown versus if it's in a suburban area where those would have to then be created to respond to future demand and understand that like the suburban stuff also needs a sense of place, an amalgamation of uses in there in order to make those restaurants viable. Because if the arena is going to be busy 75 nights a year, what do those restaurants do the other 300 odd times a year? Right.
Sorry, Councillor Slutz, I see you've raised your hand, so you're next.
Well, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of, kind of the same question, 2 different ways. Do you contemplate any other forms of commercial venue within the building that's not a restaurant?
Correct.
You do?
Yeah. So
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So there generally, from a commercial perspective, there's 3 elements. There is the concessions, food and beverage, restaurant space that exists within it. There will generally almost always be a retail store in there that sells merchandise, team logo stuff. And then sometimes there's office space and kind of other stuff like that, fitness facility and things like that. The fitness stuff I haven't included. But I have included lines for merchandise sales that can easily be from renting a store space to, a retailer. Or the hockey team to have their retail store, but they're going to pay us money to be in that space. And then we also get the food and beverage income.
Okay.
And it's not just bad hot dogs and stale popcorn.
Would part of what you do what I'm looking at in my mind is something where you have the venue itself, but attached to that venue is a tower that's a hotel. And the two things are built simultaneously, but by different people. But there's a lot of synergy there. Is that something that you delve into when you're looking to put together? I think you called it a final package. If there's a will somewhere out there from some company that says, you know what, I would like to attach a hotel to that complex, and here's what I'm prepared to do that. Do you look at those types of opportunities?
Correct. So as part of, so once we zeroed in on location and I start looking at a financing and a deal structure and strategy for this, as I said, I look at what is potentially possible out there. And we will be having negotiations with developers and landowners and others in the city and from away to get their intention and their interest in terms of what they can do. The type of project that you are talking about is what they did in downtown Edmonton with the Ice District, where they built the new Rogers Arena. There's a JW Marriott Hotel, there's condos, there's office buildings. It's what the National Capital Commission is looking to do at LeBreton Flats in Ottawa. And the Ottawa Senators currently have a plan in place where they're going to build a brand new 19,000 seat arena. And in help to pay for it, they've got 350,000 square feet of retail, office, and purpose-built rental going beside it in order to help pay for that. And that's something that they're planning to do. Can I create something like that in Brantford? I'm going to talk to people to see if it's possible. And if it's possible, I will tell you it's possible. And if it's not possible, I will also tell you it's not possible. And I'm going to give you kind of what I think is a fair, realistic, and achievable strategy in order to pay for this.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
I have another question for you. So we are improving the Civic Center, but we're limited at slightly less than 3,000 fixed seats and slightly under 400 standing, and no corporate boxes. How important is it to have a new arena built to modern standards to keep an OHL team here? And in particular, the Bulldogs.
I believe it to be critical. If you do not have a new building, I think this lease will expire and the team will leave.
All right. Okay. We're getting close to the hour, but still about 12 minutes left. Any other questions before we get the resolution to receive on the floor? Councillor Curry.
So moved.
So thank you very much, Ron. That was an excellent presentation. You've done a great job on the report. It's packed full of information and been very helpful. So if I can get a motion then on the floor. And the motion is to, if we can share that, please, Mr. Clerk. So it's to essentially receive the report with much more to come before there is a final report at the end of the year. So there's a mover, Councillor McCreary, seconder, Councillor Carpenter. Discussion. No discussion? All right, let's go to the vote. Yes.
Item 5.1 carries unanimously on a recorded vote of 10-0. Members of council voting in favor are as follows: Councillor Sless, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Samuel Hunt, Martin Caputo, Sicoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right, so I can get a mover and second as a motion to move in camera to consider specific potential locations. And as we can have that shared, please. Moved by Councillor Van Tilburg, seconded by Councillor Caputo. And Councillor Van Tilburg, if you'd read it, please, the full, well, at least the title and the reason why it goes in camera.
That council move in camera to consider the following 6.1 major sports and entertainment facility criteria and location. It says a position, plan, criteria, or instruction applied to negotiations carried on behalf of or on by and behalf of the municipality or local board.
Great. Any discussion? I just say this to the viewers. This is under the Municipal Act, this is a permitted reason to go in camera, but the specific reason is, my understanding is we'll be looking at specific sites. And so if you're discussing that publicly, as you begin determining if a site is a possibility, it can really impact your negotiating position. It'd be kind of like you're selling your home and a potential buyer and his or her agent is able to hear discussions you have with your agent. So that's the reason. So I'll call the vote to move in camera.
The motion to move in camera carries unanimously on recorded vote of 10-0. Members of council voting in favor as follows: Councillor Sless, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Samuel, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right, so we'll take about a 10 to 15 minute break and we'll reconvene in camera in council chambers.